The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of beings from across the stars filled the chamber. Their bodies came in every shape imaginable. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some floated in the air, while others needed special suits to survive in the atmosphere. The noise was incredible. Voices speaking in hundreds of languages created a sound like waves crashing on a shore. Dae-hyun stood near the entrance and felt very small. He was the human ambassador, the first of his kind to ever attend a council meeting. Earth had only joined the galactic community 6 months ago. Everything was still new and strange. The other species barely noticed him as they rushed past. Most of them had never seen a human before. To them, he was just another newcomer from a primitive world. A loud chime echoed through the hall. The noise died down immediately. Everyone moved to their seats. Dae-hyun found the small section marked for Earth. Only 5 chairs sat there compared to the hundreds that larger civilizations occupied. He settled into his seat and waited. Beside him sat Minji, a young scientist from Seoul. She clutched a datapad tightly in her hands. Her eyes were wide as she looked around at all the alien beings. Behind them were 3 military officers. Hyunwoo was a tactical analyst who had spent years studying space warfare. Ji-won served as a liaison with the alien defense forces. Tai-yang was a ship captain with experience in deep space operations. They all wore their dress uniforms, looking crisp and professional. But Dae-hyun could see the tension in their faces. They knew something bad was coming. The council leader stepped onto the central platform. It was a being that looked like a floating crystal, pulsing with inner light. When it spoke, the words appeared in everyone's mind rather than being heard with ears. The effect was unsettling for the humans, but they had learned to accept it. The message was grim. The Vorath Empire had struck again. 3 more worlds had fallen in the past week. Billions of beings were dead. The survivors were fleeing in panic, creating a refugee crisis that threatened to overwhelm the neighboring systems. The council had tried everything to stop the Vorath advance. Nothing worked. The reason was simple and terrifying. The Vorath possessed hydro weapons. These devices released a liquid that dissolved organic matter on contact. When it touched living flesh, the results were horrific. Beings melted away in seconds, screaming as their bodies turned to liquid. Even their bones dissolved. Nothing remained but puddles of goo that slowly evaporated. Worse still, the hydro weapons could be used on a massive scale. Vorath ships sprayed entire cities with the deadly liquid. Armies vanished in minutes. Even those who escaped the initial attack often died later. The hydro compound lingered in the air and soil. It contaminated food and water supplies. Whole planets became uninhabitable. Ji-won leaned forward as a holographic display appeared above the platform. It showed footage from the latest attack. A beautiful garden world had been transformed into a wasteland. Rivers ran with the remains of dissolved cities. The images were hard to watch. Several council members turned away or left the chamber entirely. The humans sat in stunned silence. The council leader continued its briefing. Every major military power in the galaxy had tried to fight the Vorath. All had failed. Traditional weapons were useless. Energy shields could not stop the hydro liquid. It seeped through the smallest gaps. Special armor only delayed the inevitable. Scientists had tried to develop countermeasures, but the hydro compound was too reactive. It attacked the molecular structure of any organic material. Panic began to spread through the chamber. Representatives shouted questions and demands. Some called for evacuation of all worlds in the Vorath's path. Others suggested surrender. A few brave voices spoke of mounting a final desperate defense, but no one offered any real solutions. The hydro weapons had broken the spirit of the galaxy. Dae-hyun felt sick to his stomach. Earth was far from the war zone, but eventually the Vorath would reach them too. He thought about his family back home. His wife and 2 children knew nothing about this threat. They were going about their daily lives, unaware that an unstoppable enemy was slowly advancing toward their world. Hyunwoo was studying the tactical data on his personal device. His training had taught him to look for patterns and weaknesses in enemy strategies. But the Vorath approach was brutally simple. They just sprayed everything with hydro weapons and waited for all life to die. There was no clever tactic to counter such overwhelming force. Minji was also reading data, but her focus was different. As a chemist, she was examining the molecular structure of the hydro compound. The Council had shared all available research with member species, hoping someone would find an answer. Her eyes moved quickly across the screen as she absorbed the information. Her fingers tapped nervously on the armrest of her chair. Suddenly, Minji stopped moving. Her eyes went wide. She read something again, then a third time. Her hand went to her mouth in surprise. She looked at the chemical formula displayed on her screen. Then she looked at the bottle of water sitting in the holder beside her seat. Her expression changed from shock to disbelief, to something that might have been amusement. She leaned close to Dae-hyun and whispered urgently in his ear. He listened, then his eyebrows rose dramatically. He looked at her screen, then at his own water bottle. He whispered back a question. She nodded firmly. He asked another question. She showed him more data on her device. His expression slowly transformed from confusion to understanding to amazement. On the central platform, the council leader was discussing evacuation protocols. Several species were already preparing to flee to the outer rim of the galaxy. Others spoke of hiding in deep space, far from any stars or planets. The mood was one of complete defeat. No one believed the Vorath could be stopped. Dae-hyun stood up. His voice was small compared to the giants around him, but the translation system carried his words throughout the chamber. He requested permission to address the council. Many representatives looked annoyed. Who was this newcomer to interrupt such important discussions? But the rules of the council were clear. Any member could speak. The council leader acknowledged him. Dae-hyun took a deep breath. He glanced at Minji, who nodded encouragement. The other humans looked confused. They had no idea what their ambassador was planning. Dae-hyun picked up his water bottle and held it high where everyone could see. He spoke clearly and calmly. He said that humanity might have a solution to the Vorath threat. The chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens laughed. Others shouted in anger. How dare this primitive species claim to solve a problem that the greatest minds in the galaxy could not address? But Dae-hyun stood his ground. He asked for a chance to demonstrate. He promised it would only take a few minutes. The council leader was curious despite itself. It had seen many strange things in its long life. Perhaps these humans had noticed something others had missed. It agreed to the demonstration. The chamber slowly quieted down. Thousands of eyes and sensors focused on the small human delegation. Dae-hyun smiled slightly and gestured to Minji. She stood up and walked toward the central platform, carrying her datapad and a determined expression on her face. Minji walked slowly toward the center of the Great Hall. Every step felt heavy under the weight of thousands of stares. Aliens of every description watched her approach. Some looked curious. Others appeared angry or skeptical. A few seemed amused that such a young being would dare to speak before the council. She reached the platform and activated her datapad. A holographic display appeared in the air above her head. It showed the chemical formula for the hydro weapon compound, the same formula that had caused so much death across the galaxy. Minji's voice was quiet but steady as the translation system broadcast her words. She explained what she had discovered. The hydro weapon was not some exotic alien compound. It was primarily composed of dihydrogen oxide with trace amounts of minerals and reactive agents. The formula was actually quite simple. Any competent chemist could identify it. She highlighted the molecular structure, showing 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to 1 oxygen atom. The council members looked confused. They knew this formula well. It was the very substance that dissolved their bodies so horrifically. What was this human trying to prove? Several representatives shouted questions. Minji raised her hand for patience. She said she needed to show them something important, something that would change everything. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small container. It held a clear liquid. The council leader scanned it with advanced sensors and confirmed what everyone feared. It was genuine hydro weapon compound. a sample that had been captured from a Vorath attack site. Even in such a small amount, it was incredibly dangerous. Several aliens in the front rows moved backward quickly. Security forces started moving toward the platform. The rules strictly forbade bringing weapons into the council chamber, but Minji spoke quickly, asking them to wait. She said she meant no harm. She only wanted to demonstrate something that humans had known for thousands of years. The council leader was intrigued enough to hold back the security team. Minji held up the container for everyone to see. She carefully opened it. The smell of the hydro compound filled the nearby area. It had a clean, almost neutral odor, but everyone knew what it could do. The chamber was completely silent. Even the translation systems seemed to hold their breath. Then Minji did something that made the entire council gasp in horror. She poured the liquid into a glass. The clear fluid splashed gently against the sides. Droplets caught the light from the chamber's ceiling. It looked so innocent, but everyone knew it was death in liquid form. Minji lifted the glass to her lips. Chaos erupted. Thousands of voices shouted at once. Aliens jumped from their seats. Some tried to run from the chamber. Others screamed warnings. The council leader ordered her to stop immediately. But Minji simply smiled and drank deeply from the glass. She swallowed once, twice, 3 times. Then she lowered the glass and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Everyone waited for her to start dissolving. Medical teams rushed forward with emergency equipment. They expected to see her flesh begin melting away at any second. But Minji just stood there looking perfectly healthy. She even smiled and held up the glass, showing it was now empty. She spoke again, her voice calm and clear. She told them the truth. What they called hydro weapons, humans called water. It was the most common substance on Earth. Their planet's surface was covered mostly with this liquid. They swam in it for fun. They bathed in it every day. Most importantly, they drank it constantly to survive. The council members looked at each other in disbelief. This was impossible. How could any species consume such a deadly substance? Minji brought up more data on her holographic display. She showed images of Earth, vast oceans of water stretching to the horizon, rivers and lakes everywhere, clouds made of water vapor floating in the sky, rain falling on cities and forests. She explained that adult humans needed about 2 liters of water every day. Without it, they would die within days. Their bodies were approximately 70% water by mass. Every cell in their body depended on this liquid to function. Blood was mostly water. Tears were water. Even human breath contained water vapor. Dae-hyun stood up from his seat. He walked down to join Minji on the platform. In his hand, he carried a large bottle. He held it up for everyone to see. Then he opened it and drank deeply, not stopping until half the bottle was empty. He let out a satisfied sigh and smiled at the watching aliens. Captain Tae-yang came down next. He carried a container of the hydro compound that had been provided by the council for research purposes. Without hesitation, he poured some into his hands. The liquid pooled in his palms. Then he splashed it onto his face, rubbing it across his cheeks and forehead. He used it to wash his hands, letting the drops fall to the floor. The aliens watched in absolute horror. Tae-yang explained that this was normal human behavior. They washed with water multiple times per day. They cooked their food in boiling water. They used it to clean their homes and their clothing. Children played in water on hot days, splashing and laughing. Athletes poured it over their heads to cool down after exercise. The council leader finally found its voice. It asked how this could be possible. Every other species in the galaxy found dihydrogen oxide to be highly corrosive. Even brief contact caused severe damage. Long exposure meant certain death. How had humans evolved to not only tolerate it, but require it? Minji pulled up more scientific data. She showed that Earth's environment was very different from most worlds in the galaxy. Water had been abundant there since the planet formed. Life on Earth evolved in water and never left it completely. Even land animals carried water inside their bodies. Their cellular structure was built around water molecules. It was the foundation of all biochemistry on their world. Other species, had evolved in environments where water was rare or absent. Their biology used different solvents and chemical processes. For them, water was indeed a dangerous substance, but for humans, it was as natural and necessary as air. They could no more live without water than they could survive without oxygen. Hyunwoo stepped forward with a tactical analysis on his datapad. He explained the military implications of this discovery. The Vorath hydro weapons were essentially spraying pressurized water at their enemies. For humans, this was no different than getting caught in a rainstorm. Uncomfortable, perhaps, but not dangerous. He continued his explanation. Human ships could fly through clouds of hydroweapon spray without damage to the crew. Human soldiers could walk through areas contaminated with the compound. They could even drink the supply if they got thirsty, as long as the mineral content was not too high. The Vorath's ultimate weapon was completely useless against humanity. Ji-won added her own perspective. She had been working with the alien defense forces for months. She had seen their fear of the hydro weapons. She understood their terror. But now she realized that humans were uniquely suited to fight this threat. They could go places and do things that no other species could attempt. Dae-hyun addressed the council directly. He offered humanity's assistance in fighting the Vorath Empire. Earth had a small fleet and limited military forces, but they could operate in environments that would kill any other species. They could board Vorath ships. They could secure hydro-weapon stockpiles. They could go where others could not. The council members began talking among themselves. The sound grew to a roar of discussion and debate. Some were excited by this news. Others remained skeptical. A few suggested it might be a human trick. But the demonstration had been clear. These beings had consumed and touched the deadly compound with no ill effects. The council leader called for order. It announced that the council would need time to discuss this revelation. But it thanked the human delegation for their information. It said that for the first time in many years, there was hope. Perhaps the Vorath advance could finally be stopped. Perhaps the galaxy had found its defenders in the most unlikely of places. As the session ended, aliens approached the human delegation. They wanted to know more. They asked questions about Earth and its water-rich environment. Some wanted to see more demonstrations. Others offered alliance and support. The humans found themselves at the center of attention, no longer overlooked newcomers but potential saviors of the galaxy. The emergency meeting lasted 3 days. Council members came and went, but the discussions never stopped. Scientists from hundreds of worlds studied the human data. Medical teams examined the human delegates repeatedly, still unable to believe what they were seeing. Each time the results were the same. Humans and water were completely compatible. Dr. Sang-hee arrived from Earth on the second day. She was a leading expert in human biology and had prepared extensive documentation. She set up a presentation in one of the council's smaller chambers. Dozens of alien scientists crowded in to hear her speak. They needed to understand how this impossible thing was true. Sang-hee began with the basics. She explained that Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Water was present almost from the beginning. Comets and asteroids brought ice to the young planet. Volcanic activity released water vapor from deep underground. Within a few 100 million years, oceans covered most of the surface. Life began in those oceans around 3.5 billion years ago. The first living things were simple cells floating in water. They used water for everything. Water carried nutrients into their bodies. Water carried waste out. Water helped them maintain the right temperature. Water was the medium where all their chemistry happened. As life evolved and became more complex, it never abandoned water. Even when creatures crawled onto land about 400 million years ago, they brought water with them. They developed skin to keep water inside their bodies. They created blood systems to pump water to all their cells. They evolved kidneys to filter and recycle water. Every part of their biology depended on water. Sang-hee showed detailed images of human cells under powerful microscopes. The cytoplasm inside each cell was mostly water. The nucleus floated in water. The mitochondria that produced energy needed water to function. DNA itself was stabilized by water molecules. Take away the water, and the cell would collapse and die within seconds. She explained human blood in detail. About 55% of blood volume was plasma, which was roughly 90% water. This liquid carried red blood cells that transported oxygen. It carried white blood cells that fought disease. It carried nutrients from food and hormones from glands. It carried heat from the body's core to the skin for cooling. Blood was essentially water with vital substances dissolved in it. Lieutenant Jae-min stood nearby with a medical kit. Sang-hee asked him to demonstrate something. He pricked his finger with a small needle. A drop of blood welled up. She collected it on a glass slide and placed it under a projector. The magnified image appeared on the wall. Everyone could see the red blood cells floating in clear plasma. The plasma was water, carrying life through human veins. The alien scientists were fascinated but still struggled to understand. One of them asked why water did not dissolve human tissue the way it dissolved their own. Sang-hee pulled up molecular diagrams. She showed how human proteins were shaped to work with water. The molecules had regions that attracted water and regions that repelled it. This created stable structures that could exist in a water environment. In contrast, she showed examples of protein structures from other species. Their molecules were not designed for water. When water touched them, it disrupted their shape. The proteins unfolded and fell apart. This was why water was corrosive to most galactic species. It literally broke down their molecular structure. But for humans, water held everything together instead of tearing it apart. She moved on to practical demonstrations. Jae-min filled a basin with water and washed his hands thoroughly. He scrubbed his skin, getting every surface wet. Then he dried off with a towel. His hands were completely undamaged. Sang-hee invited any alien scientist to examine him. Several did, using their various scanning devices. They confirmed that his tissue was healthy and intact. Next, Jae-min filled a cup with water and drank it slowly. Sang-hee monitored his vital signs on a medical display. His body temperature remained stable. His heart rate did not change. His cellular activity continued normally. The water simply entered his digestive system, was absorbed into his bloodstream and distributed throughout his body. It was the most natural thing in the world for a human. Biochemist Soonja took over the next part of the presentation. She specialized in human nutrition and metabolism. She explained that humans could not survive more than 3 days without water. Even mild dehydration caused problems. People got headaches and felt tired. Their concentration suffered. Their physical performance dropped. Severe dehydration led to organ failure and death. She showed data on human water consumption. An average adult drank about 2 liters per day. Athletes and people in hot climates needed much more. Pregnant women needed extra water. Children needed water relative to their body size. Some humans drank even more simply because they enjoyed the taste or wanted to stay healthy. Soonja also explained that humans got water from their food. Fruits and vegetables were mostly water. Meat contained water. Even bread had some water content. Cooking often involved boiling food in water or steaming it with water vapor. Human cuisine from every culture on Earth used water as a fundamental ingredient. The alien scientists asked about variation. Were all humans the same in this regard? Soonja confirmed that every human on Earth shared this trait. There were no exceptions. From newborn babies to elderly people, from those living in cold Arctic regions to those in hot deserts, all humans needed water and could safely consume it. It was a universal characteristic of their species. Strategic Officer Kyung-soo entered the chamber with military intelligence data. He had been analyzing the Vorath weapons and tactics. Now that he understood what the Hydra weapons really were, everything looked different. He presented his findings to the assembled scientists and council observers. The Vorath used high-pressure systems to spray their hydro compound across wide areas. This was effective against species that dissolved on contact, but it meant nothing to humans. A human soldier hit by the spray would just get wet. The pressure might knock them down, but they would stand back up unharmed. Their equipment might get damaged by the force, but their bodies would be fine. Kyung-soo showed recordings of Vorath attack patterns. They favored saturation bombing, covering entire regions with their weapons. This strategy assumed that any life in the area would be eliminated. But humans could walk through such zones without protection. They could enter buildings that other species considered permanently contaminated. They could search for survivors and retrieve valuable equipment. He proposed a bold plan. Human forces could land on worlds that the Vorath had attacked. They could secure strategic locations while the hydro compound was still active. They could set up bases in places the Vorath thought were safe from counterattack. When the Vorath returned to claim their conquest, they would find humans waiting for them. More importantly, humans could board Vorath ships. The Empire stored massive quantities of hydro compound for their weapons. These storage areas were considered completely secure because no enemy could survive going near them. But human boarding parties could move through those areas freely. They could capture Vorath vessels from the inside, where defenses were weakest. The alien scientists discussed this information intensely. Some were excited by the possibilities. Others worried about the risks. What if the humans were wrong? What if there were other dangers they had not considered? But test after test confirmed the same results. Humans and water were perfectly compatible. The council leader called for a vote. Should humanity be authorized to lead military operations against the Vorath Empire? Should they be given access to intelligence about Vorath movements? Should they be allowed to coordinate with other species' forces? The vote was not unanimous, but a clear majority supported the proposal. Daehyun received the news with mixed feelings. He was proud that Earth could help save the galaxy, but he knew this meant war. Human soldiers would face real danger. The Vorath had other weapons besides the hydro compound. They were a powerful empire with vast resources. Many humans would die in the fighting ahead, but he also knew it was necessary. The Vorath would not stop their expansion voluntarily. Eventually, they would reach Earth. Better to fight them now with allies than to face them alone later. He sent a message to his government. Earth was going to war, fighting on behalf of a galaxy that had barely known humans existed just months ago. Preparations began immediately. Human ships started gathering at staging points near the war zone. Volunteers signed up for military service in record numbers. Factories on Earth worked overtime to produce weapons and equipment. Scientists collaborated with alien researchers to develop new tactics. The galaxy watched and waited to see if these water-drinking beings could really stop the unstoppable Vorath Empire. Admiral Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Unity. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with focused intensity. Outside the viewports, dozens of human ships floated in formation. They were not impressive compared to the massive vessels of older civilizations. Earth's fleet was small and newly built. But today's size did not matter. Today, humans had an advantage that no other species could claim. The fleet had gathered at the Kepler frontier, a region of space that marked the edge of Vorath-controlled territory. Intelligence reports indicated that a major Vorath battle group would pass through this area within hours. It was the perfect opportunity for an ambush. Allied forces had positioned themselves far from the expected combat zone. Only the human ships waited directly in the enemy's path. Sung-ho reviewed the battle plan one more time. It was simple, which he appreciated. Simple plans were harder to ruin. The Vorath would enter the system expecting no resistance. They would detect the human fleet and likely laugh at such a small force. They would unleash their hydro weapons, confident of easy victory. Then humans would show them why they were wrong. The sensor officer called out a detection. Vorath ships were entering the system right on schedule. Sung-ho ordered all vessels to battle stations. Across the fleet, alarms sounded. Crews rushed to their positions. Weapons charged. Shields powered up. Marines checked their equipment one final time. Everyone knew what was coming. The Vorath formation became visible on the main display. 20 heavy cruisers accompanied by twice as many smaller escort ships. It was a powerful force, more than capable of destroying an entire planetary defense system. Against most enemies, this fleet would be unstoppable. The hydro weapons gave them overwhelming firepower that conventional shields could not block. Sung-ho opened a channel to all human ships. He spoke briefly, reminding everyone why they were here. Billions of beings across the galaxy were counting on them. This was humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars. He told them to stay focused and trust their training. Then he gave the order to advance. The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy. The Vorath detected them immediately and appeared to hesitate. Perhaps they were confused by ships approaching so boldly. Perhaps they wondered if this was a trap. But ultimately, they did what they always did. They opened fire with their hydro weapons. Massive streams of pressurized liquid erupted from the Vorath cruisers. The spray filled space between the two fleets. It looked like a deadly fog, glittering in the light of the system's star. Any other species would have turned and fled. But the human ships flew straight into the cloud without even slowing down. The hydro compound splashed against the human vessels. It coated their hulls and ran down their viewports. Inside, the crews barely noticed. The liquid could not penetrate their ships any more than rain could sink a submarine on Earth. Sung-ho watched the external cameras show water streaming off the Unity's armor. It was almost beautiful in a strange way. The Vorath fired again, increasing the intensity. They seemed unable to believe their weapons were having no effect. More hydro compounds sprayed across space. The human fleet was now completely engulfed in the deadly mist. Visibility was poor, but their sensors worked perfectly fine. They locked onto Vorath targets and returned fire. Human weapons were conventional by galactic standards. Missiles and energy beams, nothing exotic. But they worked well against surprised enemies. The first Vorath escort ship exploded in a brilliant flash. Then another. The enemy formation began to break apart as panic set in. They were firing their ultimate weapon with no result, while human weapons were tearing them apart. Pilot Dong-woo commanded one of the smaller human attack craft. His mission was to get close to the Vorath cruisers and target their weapon systems. He dove through clouds of hydro compound, performing maneuvers that would have been suicide for any other pilot. The liquid sprayed across his cockpit canopy, but he just activated the wipers like he was driving through a rainstorm back home. He came up beneath a Vorath cruiser and fired missiles at the hydro weapon batteries. The explosions ripped open the ship's hull. More hydro compound vented into space, creating a massive cloud. Dong-woo flew right through it, already targeting his next objective. Behind him, the crippled cruiser tried to retreat but ran into fire from other human ships. Sergeant Bo-ra led a boarding team on one of the human assault ships. Their orders were to capture a Vorath vessel intact. They needed to learn more about the enemy's technology and tactics. The assault ship latched onto a damaged escort craft that had lost power to its weapons. Cutting torches burned through the outer hull. The Marines poured through the breach, weapons ready. Inside, the Vorath crew tried to defend their ship. They fired conventional small arms, but they were disorganized and panicked. Bo-ra's team had trained extensively for ship-to-ship combat. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing corridors and eliminating resistance. The Vorath had one last defensive measure. They opened the valves on their internal hydro weapon reserves. Thousands of liters of the compound flooded through the ship's corridors. It was a desperate move meant to kill any boarders. The Vorath crew evacuated to sealed sections, expecting the humans to dissolve like every other enemy. Bo-ra and her team found themselves wading through knee-deep water. It was uncomfortable and slowed their movement, but it did not hurt them. One Marine complained that it was getting into his boots. Another joked that at least they would not need to shower after the mission. They continued their advance, sloshing through corridors filled with humanity's most feared weapon. They reached the bridge to find the Vorath command crew huddled in environment suits. The aliens stared in disbelief at humans walking casually through what should have been a death trap. Bo-ra ordered them to surrender. The Vorath captain looked at his officers, then at the water still dripping from the Marine's armor. He made a gesture of submission that the translation software recognized. Back in space, the battle was turning into a rout. The Vorath fleet had lost a third of its ships and the rest were trying to retreat. Human vessels pursued, methodically taking out engines and weapons. Sung-ho ordered his forces to capture as many enemy ships as possible. Each one would provide valuable intelligence and technology. Engineer Hae-won was part of a salvage team that boarded one of the Vorath cruisers. Her job was to secure the hydro weapon systems before the ship's crew could sabotage them. She found the main storage tanks easily enough. They held thousands of cubic meters of the compound. Warning signs covered every surface, but they meant nothing to her. A pipe had ruptured during the battle, spraying hydro compound across the compartment. Hae-won walked through the spray to reach the control panel. She wiped the liquid off the display screen so she could read it properly. Then she locked down the system to prevent any more releases. It was routine engineering work, just unusually wet. Tactical specialist Yuna had a different mission. She was studying the captured hydro weapon systems to see if humans could use them. The Vorath had designed impressive delivery mechanisms. High-pressure pumps could spray the compound over vast distances. The targeting systems were sophisticated. With some modifications, these weapons could be very useful against other Vorath ships. She proposed mounting captured Vorath weapons on human ships. It would be the ultimate irony. The Empire's own hydro weapons turned against them by an enemy who drank their ammunition. Sung-ho approved the plan immediately. Within hours, engineering teams were working to integrate Vorath technology into human vessels. As the last Vorath ships jumped to hyperspace in full retreat, the human fleet regrouped. They had won a complete victory without losing a single vessel. A few ships had taken damage from conventional weapons, but nothing serious. The hydro weapons that had terrorized the galaxy for years had proven completely useless. Sung Ho composed his report to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. The battle at Kepler had demonstrated something important. Humans could fight the Vorath Empire on equal terms. The enemy's greatest advantage had become meaningless. He recommended an immediate offensive to liberate occupied worlds while the Vorath were still reeling from this defeat. Throughout the galaxy, news of the battle spread quickly. Species that had fled from the Vorath began to hope again. The unstoppable empire had been stopped. The invincible weapons had failed. And it had happened because of humans. The newcomers from a water-soaked planet, volunteers from a dozen species, began requesting assignment to human-led units. Everyone wanted to join the forces that had won the impossible victory. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, the Galactic Council convened for a historic ceremony. The same great hall that had once echoed with panic now buzzed with celebration. Representatives from thousands of worlds gathered to honor humanity's service. The mood was completely different from that desperate meeting when the Vorath seemed unstoppable. Dae-hyun stood at the center of the chamber once again. But this time, he was not a nervous newcomer asking for a chance to speak. He wore formal diplomatic robes marked with symbols of honor from dozens of civilizations. Behind him stood Minji, Hyunwoo, Jiwon, and other humans who had played crucial roles in the war effort. They represented a species that had gone from unknown to legendary in less than a year. The council leader began the ceremony by recounting the dark days before humanity's arrival. The Vorath Empire had seemed invincible. Their hydro weapons had conquered world after world. Entire species had gone extinct. Others had fled to the edges of known space. The galaxy had been on the verge of collapse. Then humans revealed their unique immunity and everything changed. The Council formally recognized Earth as a protector species. This was the highest military honor in galactic civilization. Only 3 other species had ever received this designation, and all of them were ancient powers with thousands of years of history. Humanity had earned it in months. The Council granted Earth permanent seats on all security committees and the right to maintain military bases throughout Allied space. News networks across the galaxy broadcast the ceremony live. Trillions of beings watched as the human delegation accepted their honors. For many species, this was their first real look at humans. They saw beings that looked fragile and unremarkable. No claws or armor, no natural weapons, just soft skin and simple bodies. Yet these were the warriors who had broken the Vorath Empire. The story of humans drinking the hydro weapons had spread everywhere. It had become the most popular tale in galactic culture. Parents told it to their children. Artists created works depicting the moment Minji first consumed the deadly liquid. Comedians made jokes about humans being so tough they used weapons as refreshments. The galaxy would never forget. Scientist Minji had become famous throughout civilized space. Universities on hundreds of worlds invited her to speak about human biochemistry. She published research papers that revolutionized understanding of water-based life. Young beings across the galaxy chose to study chemistry because of her example. She handled the attention with grace, always emphasizing that she had simply recognized what any human would have known. Commander Hyunwoo led the new Galactic Defense Academy on Earth. Thousands of alien military officers came to study human tactics and strategy. They wanted to learn how to fight enemies that seemed invincible, how to find unconventional solutions to impossible problems, how to turn enemy strengths into weaknesses. The Academy quickly became the most prestigious military school in known space. The Academy's training grounds were unique in the galaxy. They included pools and water obstacles that would terrify most species. Alien students learned to overcome their natural fear of the substance humans called water. They wore protective suits at first, but gradually gained confidence. Some even learned to touch small amounts of water briefly, though it required immense courage on their part. Admiral Sung Ho commanded the Joint Defense Fleet, a mixed force of human and alien ships. The fleet patrolled liberated territories and hunted remaining Vorath holdouts. The Empire's expansion had completely stopped. Their forces retreated whenever humans appeared. The mere presence of human ships was often enough to make enemy fleets surrender without fighting. The Vorath Empire itself had undergone dramatic changes. Their emperor had been overthrown after the defeats at human hands. A new government took power and immediately sent peace envoys to the Galactic Council. They offered reparations and promised to dismantle their military hydroweapon production. The galaxy debated whether to trust them, but at least the killing had stopped. The peace envoys had been shocked to learn the truth about hydroweapons. The Vorath had never realized that other species' ultimate terror was just common water. Their scientists had developed the weapons centuries ago without understanding why they were so effective. When they learned that humans drank it casually, the envoys actually laughed at the absurdity. One diplomat commented that the universe had a strange sense of humor. Ji-Wan continued her work as a liaison between human and alien military forces. She helped coordinate joint operations and ensured that different species could work together effectively. It was challenging work because so many species had biological requirements that conflicted with each other, but she had become an expert at finding compromises and creative solutions. Earth itself had transformed. Contact with galactic civilization brought new technologies and knowledge. Human cities now had landing pads for alien visitors. Schools taught galactic history alongside Earth history. Children grew up learning multiple alien languages. Trade flowed between Earth and thousands of other worlds. Humanity had truly become part of the larger community of stars, but Earth remained unusual. Tourist ships arrived daily, bringing aliens who wanted to see the legendary water world. They stared in amazement at the oceans covering most of the planet's surface. They watched humans swim and surf in the waves. They saw children playing in sprinklers on hot days. Many visitors took home bottles of Earth water as souvenirs, carefully sealed in special containers. Some aliens found it disturbing that humans lived surrounded by what they considered a deadly substance. Others were fascinated by the courage it must take to bathe in acid every day, not realizing that humans felt no courage was required. A few even began to see water as beautiful rather than terrifying. Art collectors paid high prices for human paintings depicting oceans and waterfalls. Human merchants took advantage of the galaxy's new attitude toward water. They sold specially packaged Earth water as an exotic beverage. Not for drinking, of course, but for display in secure containers. Wealthy aliens kept bottles of water in their homes to show guests. It became a status symbol, proof that one had connections to the legendary humans. Security systems across the galaxy were redesigned. Scientists developed sensors that could detect even trace amounts of water vapor. Alarms would sound if the deadly substance was present. Wealthy individuals installed these systems in their homes and businesses. They never realized they were essentially buying very expensive humidity detectors that humans used for simple comfort in their houses. The irony was not lost on the humans. Their greatest military advantage was something they had never considered special. Water was just water. They had built their entire civilization around it without thinking twice. Only when they met aliens did they realize how strange their biology was. It taught them an important lesson about perspective and assumptions. Daehyun reflected on this during the council ceremony. A year ago he had been worried that humans would be dismissed as primitive newcomers. Now they were celebrated as saviors. But nothing about humans had changed. They were the same species they had always been. The galaxy had simply learned to see them differently. He thought about future challenges. The Vorath threat had ended, but the galaxy was vast and dangerous. Other enemies would emerge eventually. Other crises would test the strength of civilization. But now the galaxy knew something important. Sometimes the solution to an impossible problem came from the most unexpected source. Sometimes the newcomers saw what the ancients had missed. After the ceremony, Daehyun walked through the council complex with his team. They passed by a courtyard with a decorative fountain. Water splashed and sparkled in the alien sunlight. Most species gave it a wide berth, but a few brave individuals had stopped to admire it from a safe distance. They whispered about the humans' incredible courage to work with such a dangerous substance. Minji approached the fountain and trailed her hand through the water. It was pleasantly cool against her skin. She watched the ripples spread across the surface. Then she cupped her hands and took a drink. The watching aliens gasped and stepped back. Some covered their eyes, unable to watch what they thought was certain death. She turned to them with a smile. Through the translation system, she explained that this was completely normal for humans. This was just water. The same water that flowed through their bodies. The same water that covered their homeworld. The same water that the galaxy had feared for so long. She invited them to touch it if they dared, though she knew most would not. One young alien, braver than the others, slowly extended a heavily gloved hand toward the fountain. It barely brushed the surface before pulling back quickly. But it had touched the legendary substance and survived. Its companions cheered the act of courage. The young being would tell this story for the rest of its life. As the humans departed the council complex, they talked about returning to Earth. They missed the simple pleasures of home. Swimming in the ocean, walking in the rain, taking long showers, drinking cold water on a hot day. All the things that the galaxy found terrifying, humans found comforting and normal. It was good to be unique, but it was also good to go home. The galaxy would remember this chapter in its history for millennia, the time when the Vorath Empire threatened to conquer everything.